Hi, I'm Blake and I'm with Boulevard Home Service and Repair. We're here today to talk about smooth top ranges and also the pots and pans that properly work the best for each unit. Now with smooth top ranges, there are two different types. There's induction and there's also what's called radiant. Radiant is the type that most people have in their home. Basically you have an element underneath the cooktop itself and it is heating the glass, and then the glass is then transferring the heat to the pan. Underneath each element, and if you turn one on in your home, you'll see it, it looks like a diagonal piece that goes across the element when it gets nice and hot. Now that device is called a limiter. Now what that device does is it measures the reflective heat given back from the glass toward the element. So we want to make sure with the radiant top that our pan is as flat as possible. So we don't want to have your concave where it bends in, your convex where it bends out. We don't want that because that's what we're touching the surface with. We want to transfer that heat. So the best thing to do is when you take your cookware, I've got a straight edge here. What you want to do is you want to put this across your pan. Now the pan is concave, which means it bends inward. So basically the only part that's touching on the surface of this pan is about the outer inch to 2 inches is touching. The whole center part of this is not touching. Because it's not touching the glass, it's not transferring heat. So that heat is then being reflected back toward the element itself, and then the element does what they call short cycling. And what short cycling is, and you probably have all seen it, if you watch the element, you'll have it on a certain temperature, it goes on and then it goes back off almost immediately, and it does that during the whole cooking process. That strictly means that the glass is so hot, it's reflecting the heat back to the limiter and it's shutting it off. So it's really affecting how well your range does cook and the time it does take to cook, because a lot of complaints are it takes forever to get to boiling. Once you get to boiling, that glass is so hot that when you turn it down, it doesn't stop boiling, and so you have to move it to another burner or slide it off the burner to have it cool down. Well, the biggest reason is pots and pans, so we'll get into some pots and pans here and we'll discuss each one of them. First and foremost, we have aluminum, and then we have what's called anodized, which is basically a hardened aluminum. We also have copper bottomed, we have cast iron, we have cast iron with a porcelain coating, and we also have glass and ceramic type, and then we also have titanium pans. We've got some examples. We don't have glass and ceramic, but we'll cover that during the video. Most people don't have that type of pans nowadays, but we will talk about that so we understand the differences in how they work with your range. Here's an example of a pan. Everybody's seen the pot and pan. Everybody knows what they look like. This is an example of aluminum pan. Now, aluminum pans are fantastic. They have great conductivity. They transfer that heat very well from the surface of the glass to the pan, as long as the surface is nice and flat. If it's not, we have some heating issues, but with them, they're great because they're lightweight. The only problem with pans like this is they dent very easy, they ding very easy, and then also over time, as you're cooking with aluminum pans, especially the lightweight ones, the metal will warp, and so it makes that bend in them, the bottom of it, worse over time. But the thing also about aluminum pans is aluminum is a softer metal. So with softer metals such as this, or copper, because they're both a softer metal, as it sits on your cooktop and it gets warm and you slide it a little bit on your range top, you will get marks on your range top. So when you take your pot and pan off when you're done, you'll have like a ring kind of where the outside surface is touching, where not all of it's touching, or you'll have like little marks in the glass from this. Now it does come off with some smooth top cleaner. It comes off very easily, but the biggest reason that those are caused in your glass top is because of the softer metal pans, such as this, and also your copper. All right, this pan I have here in my hand now, this is anodized aluminum pan. So this is aluminum, but it's much heavier than the regular standard aluminum pan. With the anodized, they run some electrical current through it, so it's a hardened metal. So it is pretty hard compared to aluminum. What's fantastic about these is once they're flat, they pretty much stay flat. They don't really have the bending with the heat. They take a little bit longer to heat up. They still have great conductivity, but they take just a little bit longer to warm up than just a regular aluminum pan. It has the same great conductivity as your regular aluminum pan, but because it is a little harder surface, when you slide it across your range, it doesn't necessarily leave the marks that a regular aluminum pan does. Now it still leaves marks and you still may have to clean them off from time to time, but it does a much better job as far as staying the same shape over time. The one thing bad about anodized type is they're usually mostly come in black, and then when they get stains on the outside, usually the stains are very difficult to take off. So as long as you don't mind that, these are a great option as far as cookware for your radiant type range. All right, now in my hand here, I've got cast iron. Everybody's very familiar with cast iron. Now, cast iron is fantastic. It holds up forever as long as you season it, take care of it. Yes, it does hold up forever. It takes a little bit longer to heat up because again, we're transferring the heat to the glass and then the glass to this. So because this is a thicker metal, it takes a little bit longer for it to warm up. consequently making the glass hotter, meaning you can't turn it down to simmer it as easy. Because it is such a rough surface though, it can, instead of putting marks in your glass, it can scratch your glass. Generally, we don't recommend using this with your radiant type tops or your glass tops. We don't recommend using cast iron that's not porcelain coated, and we'll talk about the porcelain coated next. All right, in my hand here I have a cast iron pot that has a porcelain coating on the outside. These work fantastic with your radiant tops. Again, they take a bit longer to heat up strictly because it is a thicker metal and we are warming the porcelain. And this will not scratch your tops of either your induction or your radiant type tops. This will not scratch it. The bad thing about porcelain is if you let all the water or anything boil out of it, so all we're heating is this, you do have the slight chance that this could actually melt to your cooked top, because the porcelain will get so hot because there's no liquid inside there to transfer that heat to, transfer it all to the pot, and then that pot can has the potential of basically welding to the top of your cooktop, and then you will ruin your top at that point. Here's an example of an aluminum pot that has a very thick bottom to it. Now, this is a problem, to have this very thick bottom. It's great because it holds heat for a long period of time. It's great for canning, great for simmering because it will hold the heat without using much energy from the range because you can turn it way down. The problem with this type of bottom is it takes forever for it to heat up, especially with a radiant top. Induction is different, but for a radiant top, what will happen is because it's so thick and this is taking so long to get heat from the glass, like we talked about earlier with short cycle, the element will go on and off because this thick piece of aluminum here is taking a very long time transferring that heat from the cooktop surface itself to the pot. So it will take forever to boil, but again, it has great conductivity, but this is something that usually you want to be mindful of when you're looking at pots and pans for your range tops, because we don't want something with a thick bottom like this generally for everyday cooking. Okay, and the last example of pans we've got, this is a stainless steel pan on the bottom of it. It's an older pan, but it's marked on it stainless steel. Now, stainless steel is probably your preferred choice for a radiant type cooktop because one, if you get a flat surface on one, make sure that it is flat. When you buy it, it does stay flat. It's not a softer metal like your aluminums or your copper bottoms, so when you slide it across your range top, it doesn't necessarily leave marks in it. Also, it has great conductivity. It's very durable. And this is the preferred type of cookware that we do want to use with your radiant type cooktops. It does work the best. But there are a couple of different types of pans that we don't have today. One is glass pans, Corningware. It's not much around anymore, but some people still have it. Most manufacturers with radiant type tops, they don't generally like you using that type of cookware with them, strictly because if it gets scratched or dinged or something in washing or whatever you're doing and it slides across the glass, it can also scratch the glass surface. And then also, if you do let it boil dry, it can have the potential to stick to the tops. It's more likely with the porcelain coated ones, but that is always a possibility. So that's something to be mindful of if you have that type of cookware. And then we also have titanium pans. Titanium pans are a lot like aluminum. They're harder than aluminum, so they do work a little bit better with the surface. They don't seem to slough off as much. They clean up very well too. So that is also a very good viable option if you didn't want to go with a stainless steel or a hardened aluminum pan. Those also work very well. One other type we did talk about is copper bottom pan. Now, copper bottom pans, we don't have an example of that one either, but copper bottom pans, they do have great conductivity. They transfer heat very well. The thing about copper pans is if you boil something at a very high temperature or high temperature for a long time, the copper itself will give off a little bit of a taste into your food. So if you're wondering why your food tastes a little bit odd with copper, that is always a possibility if you do cook it at very high temperatures for a long time. Okay, so when we get back to our radiant type cooktops, with those type, I usually do recommend flattest pan as possible. Make sure when you go to buy your pots and pans or you have older ones, take a straight edge, like, you know, and do put across the bottom, make sure they're nice and flat. As far as my recommendations, my first choice would be stainless steel. My second choice would probably be an anodized aluminum, and then the porcelain type cast iron, and it's about on par with a regular aluminum type pan. Then I would step into everything else past that. We get into our copper bottoms, thicker bottom aluminum type pans. That's what I would probably go as far as order, as far as the types of cookware that I would use with a radiant type cooktop. In this video, we mostly covered your radiant and your gas type cooktops. Now, in a previous video, we talked about the advantages and disadvantages of induction type cooking. Now, induction type is fantastic, but there was a bunch of comments and questions about the methods and why it's better and why it's not better with induction range. So in an upcoming video, we're going to talk about these questions and hopefully give you a little more insight on induction cooking. As always, these are all just personal recommendations from a lot of years of being in the service repair industry for the types of pots and pans you do want to use with your radiant type cooktop. They all work, they all just have their advantages and disadvantages. So hopefully this video will help you decide which cookware is best for you and will work best for your type of cooktop and what you would like to use for that. If you have any other questions or any other comments, please post them below. We'd be happy to respond to them. And please like and subscribe to our Boulevard home feed, and we'll get you more videos such as this.